So you're animating in Source FilmMaker, but you have a scene where a character needs to fall to the ground like this and just kind of crumple. And this could be them get hit by something, explosion, whatnot. Doesn't matter. They just get their shit pushed in. There is a much simpler way to do this other than going through and keyframing every single one of these positions that it goes into. And that's using Source FilmMaker's physics engine. To start off, what we got to do is start getting our tools up. Our main tool, biggest hammer, that's going to be this GitHub that has the two main scripts you'll be using. With the link down below, you can go here to this GitHub, and then once you're here, just go to code, download the zip file, and once you have it downloaded, you're going to need to find out where the hell all your Source FilmMaker files are. So this can be in multiple different places. For me specifically, it is in a D drive, but if you don't know where those Source FilmMaker files are, what you can do instead is in your Steam client here, go to your settings, go down to properties, and it'll open up this little window here. And then inside this window, you can go to installed files. You'll see the size of installation, and then just click on browse. Once in here, go to game, and then in this folder, you're going to take these three folders here, platform, SDK tools, and user mod, and bring them right into game. Now it's going to ask to replace files in this destination. Just go ahead and press yes. This should in turn give you access to a rig in here with rig physics and run SFM physics simulation. Now that we have the main scripts, let's go ahead and create our scene. So we have our character. With that character, if we want him to interact with the gravity or other objects, all we have to do, right click, go to rig, and then rig physics. With the rig, if we open up this rigid bodies subgroup here, and we can click on all these different body bones, and you'll notice that they have these different attributes. What do they mean? We can leave force and handle pretty much out of it. I don't know what they do, but tampering with them has always led to disaster for me in some way or form. So just leave them alone is the best thing to do unless you know what you're doing. As far as shape goes, it'll determine whether the joint will act more like a ball and be very like loose and rotate a lot, or more like a square where if it lands on a side, it'll do its best to stay on that side. Drag it more to the right, it'll be a sphere, but by default it'll act more like a cube. Kinematic, this determines whether the object will be interacted with by physics. So if kinematic is default, which is 0, that means that it'll automatically be basically just a loose object, meaning gravity will interact with it, and any other objects with this rig attached will collide with it in some way based off its collision box. Bounce, pretty self-explanatory, just how much it'll rebound off of hitting a different surface. So if it's super bouncy, it'll bounce constantly. If not, then it'll stay pretty, tame. And friction has to do with how much it'll slide. So if there's like no friction at all, so all the way to the left, it'll basically just be sliding constantly, but all the way to the right, it'll be like just sandpaper stuck. It doesn't want to move. Super grippy. Really weird. Linear damping has to do with the speed at which physics interact. So if you crank that up, gravity will act much faster. If not, it'll be a little more floaty. And rotational dampening, same kind of thing, but instead it'll just be the rotation of objects and not the movement. Moving on, let's set up a scene here. So let's say we want this guy to he just gets crumpled. So he's sitting there and he gets hit by a box in the head and falls to the ground. So he's already set up. All the kinematic values are set to 0 because we want him to move. We want him to react to everything. But now let's just go ahead and get a box in here. Particularly for physics, I like to use the item crate just because its collision model here is pretty square, pretty simple, just pretty useful tool all around. Bring it up. Set it as rig to rig physics. Leave them alone. Now that we're all set up, we just right click, rig, and run simulation. but nothing happened. This is because you have to select a finite amount of time to run the physics. And if you have the script editor open, it'll kind of give you these helpful hints on the side. So we'll go down here in our timeline, in the motion editor specifically, and click on the far left here, drag it to the beginning of our clip, and then we'll just have it go to, it's like just a few seconds in here, just a small amount of time. If you select huge amounts of time, it takes a lot longer for the scene to calculate everything. But now that we have it calculated, we'll just go ahead and run the simulation. Now we have this issue. Our boys seem to just ignore the floor entirely and just repeatedly fall through the floor. So how do we fix it? You see, the thing with Source FilmMaker is that these rigs, and specifically the maps, will not collide with each other. In order to get around this, I have a model from the workshop that is useful for all sorts of different situations, whether you want to set it up as a wall or an invisible floor. Link to that in the description as well. Move it to where it kind of sits at the bottom of Steve's feet here. Rig it up. And then we will set kinematic to true. So now that that's here, if we go ahead and make it invisible and try running the script again, now we have a little bit of a different story. As you can see, these guys actually interact with the ground now and ragdoll in a way that you would expect from them. So let's say you're in a situation like this. You have two characters and one just beats the absolute shit out of him. Knocks him out cold, he's dead on the floor. Now how do you get your character to interact this way? Instead of this, he's just loose, doesn't seem to affect him whatsoever. To start with, I'm going to go and kind of break down this scene I set up prior. Now if you notice over here in the animation set editor, there's a couple of hidden items. First off, we have the floor, like mentioned before. But we also have a separate item. Like I said, great, this thing is useful as all hell. But it's invisible for a reason. Because with script physics, complex models and their handles don't really follow very well. Especially if it's a custom model like this Steve that you can pull from the workshop. Because when you move him along, the bones associated with the physics of his specific model don't come with it. They stay in the place that they started. So having him punch another character doesn't really work. To get around this, I use this item crate here. And if we hop into the keyframes, it's just a simple animation where he starts and it ends right here at the collision. This way kind of delivers a bit of force to the object and is set to kinematic, so that way it doesn't get affected by gravity and all the animation gets lost. And so once you have this animation here set up where it just delivers a blow, hide him after you calculate all the stuff and you'll have a little hit like this. Now, let's say you're in a different situation. Our boy Steve here is gonna just be hanging out. He has a little idle animation and he gets a bunch of blocks thrown on him. But our boy is built different. His animation is not going to be interfered with. He's not going to ragdoll. Those boxes are not going to hurt him in the slightest. But we still want those boxes to bounce off of him. So in order to do that, we have to go to our boy Steve and set all of his bones to kinematic. That way he doesn't ragdoll. But there's a lot of bones here. And so in order to get all of those to kinematic, especially on more complex models, it can be a bit of a pain in the ass. So to get around that, I made scripts that are in the description below that you can subscribe to, and it'll give you these three pieces here, which are set kinematics on, off, and invert. So more description on those in the actual workshop page, but we'll just go ahead and set all of these to on because we don't want him to interact with gravity whatsoever. Now, if you're animating with a character that already has the rigid bodies attached, I highly suggest you turn those off as far as selectable, and make the physics constraints also unselectable. That way you're not accidentally clicking them and messing them up when you're trying to animate. However, if you notice, when you try and go here to like the upper arm and rotate it, nothing happens. This is because of these attributes that get added to the bone groups, which are the weight of the handle. So these basically determine how heavily the model listens to the physics rig. So if you wanted to keep the original animation set, all you have to do is select these handle weights and just slide them all to 0. This will allow the actual main skeleton to take hold. So if you want like subtle use of an object to use gravity, you can just slide these like halfway. That way there's still influence from the original animation, but it'll be a little more loose as far as gravity goes. So I just went through, made a quick little animation using the puppeteer method. And just kind of simple, just something that he moves around. And as you can see, his animation is unfazed. However, the main thing you will notice is that with animations like this, since the handle doesn't follow, it will just kind of stick to whatever the initial pose was. Now, in this situation, you would likely attempt to bind the rigid body's handle or force to the original skeleton. However, every time I have tried this, it will crash the game. So, as of right now, I do not have a solution for this, but as far as just animation goes, that's how you get it back. Let me know if you guys have any other requests for different types of tutorials, or maybe a different type of script to maybe handle some of these other attributes if you'd like. Up to you, just let me know, and I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.